Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, if the prospect of crowded public transport or being stuck in traffic jams fills you with dread, I invite you to join me in exploring the world of micromobility and the technology that makes all that possible. Now, regular listeners will remember that Spin provides dockless electric scooters in more than 60 markets across the US, and it's also a micromobility arm of Ford. Now, as the company expands across Europe and recently launched in the UK, I want to learn more about how their technology is enabling micromobility to deliver a convenient, clean and cost-effective travel choice, instead of buying a car or using a ride-hailing service that can just increase congestion and pollution. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Madeira, where Felix Petersen is waiting to join us once again on the podcast to discuss how their trials are progressing nationally and how the UK rollout is comparing with similar schemes in Europe. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you just tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Hey, Neil. I'm Felix Petersen. I'm heading Spin Micromobility in Europe. Spin is a micromobility company. We do e-scooters, e-bikes, originally from the US. And now since last year, we've expanded to Europe. And I have was given the great opportunity to head our expansion into Europe. And here I am. So maybe a bit of background. I'm a tech startup guy. I've been doing startups and apps for the last 20 years. And then 2019, really got bitten by the mobility bug and saw this like as the next big frontier where, software is really transforming the cities and the physical space we live in. And I got super fascinated by it. So, here I am.
Incredibly cool. And of course, we have spoke about Spin e-scooters on the podcast before, but that was several months ago, and we will have a lot of new listeners to the podcast. So for those people, a little bit about Spin e-scooters and where they can expect to see them, because you're expanding rapidly, aren't you? And they've probably seen them in their city, but not known too much about it. So can you just set the scene there?
Sure. So the company started 2 years ago in the United States, and we've been expanding there. I think we're in 60, 70 markets, cities in the US. And then, as I mentioned, last year, we started in Europe and currently in 3 countries. We're in the UK, where we are running 7 of these pilot schemes, the e-scooter trials that started this year, actually last year in the United Kingdom. We've just recently launched Spain, so in Madrid and in Tarragona in Spain. And we are in Germany in 16 cities, mostly in the west, in this state of North Rhine-Westphalia, so kind of around the Cologne, Ruhr area. In these cities, we'll be launching a couple of more cities, kind of rapidly expanding, especially in Germany and in Spain this year. We'll be seeing more countries in Europe also where Spin will be present.
And I think the last time we spoke, you were doing a few trials in the UK, and I know you're doing these e-scooter trials all over. But what are the key learnings from those trials? Is there anything that you took from there? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot to learn. Especially, it's always interesting to see how people react in markets where there weren't any scooters. And there's always a strong novelty effect. So people trying it out. And I think in the past, the challenge was always, to get people to try it to the extent where they realize that this is a real alternative for them every day. And I think through COVID and through a product that we introduced, which is basically unlimited passes. So it's like almost like a flat rate, like you have for your Spotify or your Netflix. It's really, we started seeing a behavior that I think is novel and interesting to see, where we see a lot of usage, where we see retention going up, where we see people using it every day, almost all day. So especially in the UK, in the markets we're in Milton Keynes and Basildon and Chelmsford, so smaller communities. We see a usage behavior where people really use this as an alternative to cars, as an alternative to public transport. But basically, they just, especially in smaller communities, just do everything on a scooter, which is really cool to see. That this segment is growing, where people really use it all day, every day, basically. We didn't expect that the usage to be so high. I mean, we're basically we have these swappable battery scooters. We basically every night we need to swap almost all batteries because people just ride them a lot.
It's incredibly cool, and I think there's so many behaviours and attitudes that have changed. And I think as the world opens back up from lockdowns and people begin to do that commute to the office again, I think it's everyone's worst nightmare being on a crowded public transport, whether it be a train or a bus, because you don't want to be in that kind of environment now. So I see the huge appeal here. But I'm curious, from your point of view, how are you continuing to build a genuinely sustainable transportation solution and also avoid any misuse? Because, again, that's quite a big challenge as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, of course. And then there are these novelty effects where you see potentially some issues in the beginning. There's a couple of things we're doing specifically in the UK. We have the strictest ID and age verification in the industry. So we really make sure that there is no underage riding. We made sure that the identity of the user and the driver's license is really known to us. We're working with authorities, with the police. These scooters are connected, right? So basically, there is less potential for misuse than maybe with not connected vehicles, right? I mean, we've had a fun anecdote. We even had things like a bank robbery, basically, or a mugging happening on the scooter. Well, what happens is the police calls you, and basically we work together with the authorities, and very quickly you can catch people. So if you want to do any antisocial behavior or any crimes, I recommend not using a connected device with an IoT box on it. I mean, that's kind of the fun anecdote, but like really, we're doing everything we can, from rider education, from giving out helmets. We're partnering with large retail chains in the UK to give out helmets for free to our users. We have these riding academies. Of course, some of this is now in a digital form because of COVID. But this has been something we've been doing from the beginning at Spin. Lots of community partnership, community outreach. People on the street from Spin being available to riders, explaining how it works. So both digital and analog education. And yeah, it's a new vehicle. It's something that, all the other vehicles you see on the street have been around for 100 years. And this is really a new class of vehicle, and it's really fun and easy to use. But of course, there is an educational element where, we have to make sure people use it in responsible ways, and we curb any sort of antisocial riding behavior. But yeah, I mean, it's a education. There's some technical things we can do. Then there's education on the user side, but then there's also the authorities that we work closely together with, and they understand also how this is working, and that certain behavior is illegal. So just as you wouldn't let your kid into a car and hand him the keys to your car. It's also clear that you can't just unlock a scooter for your 12-year-old and let them ride, and these cases. We've very effectively learned to curb, and the feedback that we're getting from the communities on these trials is great. So all the stakeholders, the police, the county, the council, everyone is actually quite pleased with these trials. As you know, last year no one kind of knew what to expect, and it was a large experiment, and we applaud the councils that. The communities that participated in it for doing it and for taking that leap, and it seems like everyone's really pleased by it. And some of the things we're seeing in the data, like we've done a mode shift survey where we really asked the people, what is this trip substituting for you? And 27% of people were basically taking their last ride instead of a single car journey or a single car share journey. Over 60% have done it at least once, that they substituted a car ride. And that, in addition with our carbon neutral operations, really makes this a great alternative. And the data is starting to show that this is really something that has a net positive impact on mobility and on people's lives and the communities we're present.
And I'm curious, as somebody that's working all over the world with these e-scooters, are there any usage trends in the US and Europe that you're seeing right now? And also, are there any differences between trends in the US and Europe?
Yes. I think the usage, I mean, there's some general trends that are universally true, which is, like I said, it's a very low barrier, very fun scooter mode of transport, basically. And then you have a certain segment of people that permanently start using the scooters. But then, of course, you have, it's a hyper local business, so it really represents also the traits of the of the communities we're present. So, for example, in Milton Keynes, it's a big commuter town. So when COVID is over and the commuting will commence, you'll see a lot of people use it to get to the train station, then take a train, for example, into London, come back, and then use it really for the first mile, last mile. We have smaller communities where, with our flat rate, people basically just starting to use it to do everything, whether they visit their grandma or run to the shop, or I basically constantly use a scooter of ours. Then in cities in Spain, we're present, for example, in Tarragona, you have a large beachfront. So you see also, a bit of just recreational riding, fun riding on the weekends, people going up and down the promenade on these scooters. So it really represents, the different usage groups that we have and the characteristics of the different communities we're in. So yeah, there's a big difference. I think in Europe, it might actually, in smaller communities, represent more substitution of short car journeys. Where in the US, especially during COVID, we saw what you mentioned earlier, quite a large substitution of people just not feeling comfortable in crowded buses. And so we saw it, for example, in the length of trips during COVID. The length of trip went from 11, 12 minutes to over 20 minutes. In our US market, so you could really see how this was being used as an alternative for people to get around.
And do you think that trend will continue, where people increasingly move away from being packed on public transport and being much more open to e-scooters now? Because there just seems to be a big shift in attitudes, not just from I don't want to be surrounded by lots of people because of the pandemic, but also the shift towards sustainability and their own environmental impact of their actions. Is that a trend you see continuing?
Well, I mean, first of all, public transport has a very, very good environmental impact. So I do think that public transport will remain the backbone, especially in very large cities. It will remain the backbone. I mean, one metro car fits 1,000 people and can move 1,000 people. So I think that's gonna be. It's really hard to predict, but after the pandemic, I think people will go back to a certain extent. Some things will change forever, but I think especially public transport will remain there. The micromobility plays a really big role in connecting the big hubs of public transport then to the literal last mile to where people really, really have to go. I think the larger trend we're seeing is really a transformation of urban space, right? Because one aspect of it is our carbon footprint, and there's been obviously a lot of personal change happening in people over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where they're really much more considerate about their personal carbon footprint, and we've seen a lot of people exchanging individual car journeys in big cities for ride sharing, micromobility, public transport, and a combination of all of it. But there's a second aspect, and that's the space in our city, right? It's it's the literal footprint of a vehicle. And that's what's so great about micromobility, whether it's bikes or whether it's e-scooters or any kind of new form factors that we will see evolving, 3 wheels, 4 wheels. I mean, there's some really exciting things going on. But basically, this category of vehicles under 400 kilograms, relatively small footprint, fully electric, shared, and generally with a very favorable ratio of sort of payload, meaning one person, and the space you take up in our cities, right? So I think what we're seeing is a large transformation that was accelerated a lot by COVID, where cities really rethink public space and say, like, wait, this is a parking space. We can use this to make a really cool green space here. Whether it's how people have started using public land and sidewalks during COVID, where they got creative with spreading out more into the public space to secure social distancing. And I think that's the kind of things that were a trend before and are now accelerating. And I think that's where micromobility plays a huge role when we go from these small, ancient bike lanes from the 70s to the larger ones and to the protected ones. And then now, what some people call bike superhighways. On that, you can really different lightweight vehicles can coexist. And that will be the real game changer. I think we'll see a completely different use of space, and it will be quieter, more considerate, and just generally gives people a higher quality of living in cities. And that's the big trend behind it. And it probably is accelerated by COVID, but it's something that was there before and that will continue as sort of a mega trend in big cities around the world.
And if I was to ask you to take a gaze into your virtual crystal ball, what do you think the future of micromobility will look like? Is there any direction you see this heading?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is that this category of micromobility is really, people really understand what that really means, that it's not just, bikes and e-bikes and e-scooters, but what's really cool about our industry is that now, the way these vehicles get manufactured and the way, that software plays a big role, we are on a completely different innovation cycle. We saw the e-scooters first introduced as almost, literal toys, basically, taken right out of a retail shop and then used for sharing. And now in the last 2 years, we've seen an incredible evolution with these vehicles to being a lot more durable. And it's almost too hard and too early to tell how long they will last, because the current generation can last 12, 24 months, even in under very hard sharing conditions. The whole swappable battery has revolution, I would almost want to say, has really changed the way we operate, because we don't really need to collect the whole scooter to charge it, but we can open it up, just exchange the battery, which allows us in turn to do operations with electric cargo bikes, for example, instead of big vans. So the pace of innovation in this industry is really, really great to see. The safety and the fun factor of usage of these vehicles has evolved incredibly fast, and hopefully in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see completely new form factors. Vehicles where you can pick up your 2 kids from school, vehicles where you can do larger shopping, vehicles that you can use in poor weather conditions that have a roof, but all lightweight and electric. And then people are really gonna, then our cities, they're gonna appear so futuristic, and it's gonna be so much fun, because what I said earlier, all the vehicles we see out there, the cities, they haven't really changed a lot in 100 years. I mean, cars have become a bit more, of course, more futuristic looking, but in the end, they're still cars. And even an electric car is still a car. A bike has been around for 100 years. I think already now people have this effect when we launch our scooters in the city, that they're like, wow, now I feel like I'm living in the future. Because you have this lightweight, silent scooters just zipping by, and imagine that with 3, 4, 5 more different form factors that we will see. So I think that's a big trend. Another big trend is more dynamic, pricing packages and really making sure that people can basically get unlimited mobility for a mobility budget, right? And so everyone has a mobility budget that, they split between different modes. And I think in 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to see hopefully offerings where, I pay a flat rate every month, and then whatever my use case is, whatever I need, if I need an electric van to do my moving today, or to go to IKEA, or whether I need an electric cargo bike to do some shopping, or whether I just need a scooter to go really quickly from A to B, that's all covered by one, sort of flat rate that gives me the opportunity to do everything in a sustainable and carbon neutral way. That's something that I think is going to happen much quicker than people think. Maybe I think that's already going to be the reality in 4 or 5 years from now.
Wow, that's incredibly cool. I love how you've helped bring it to life for everyone listening. And it just feels like time is moving so quickly right now. And already we're in Q2 of 2021. But for the rest of the year, well, we'll have people listening all over the world. What can people expect from Spin here in 2021?
Well, we are going to introduce e-bikes, which I'm very excited about. So we're going to see a lot of markets launching with e-bikes. So it's we'll be able to offer a combination of both e-bikes and our scooters, which is really cool. It's already a step in that direction that I just mentioned of, really giving you the right vehicle for whatever you want to do. Then we've made some really cool announcements around some partnerships recently. One is with a startup called Drover, which allows us to create a product that we call Spin Insight, which basically gives the scooters eyes and ears. So it has a front-facing camera that basically can detect this antisocial riding behavior that you mentioned earlier. So, for example, sidewalk riding. The scooter will understand that is being ridden on a sidewalk and will slow down and basically, tell the user to please ride on the right surface. But what's really interesting about this as well is that it allows us to collect a trove of data, whether that's the quality of the surface that the user is riding on, so we can build dynamic scooter maps basically for a city or micromobility maps, where we understand that where it's cobblestone, where are potholes, and be able to build dynamic navigation for you around that. We will have a lot more data and insight to share with our city partners coming from these sensors of Spin Insight. Already now we're sharing with the cities. I mean, this is incredible. If you're an urban planner or if you work in the mobility department, you're getting a new mode of transport and you're getting the real-time data, especially in these pilots, to understand completely, where's the demand? Where are people using these things? Are they riding? What time are they riding to the train station? Are there enough scooters on the train station? Where do I maybe need to build an additional micromobility bike lane? Because there's a lot of people riding there, but maybe it's not the safest intersection. So maybe I need an intervention at that intersection. And I mean, that's completely unheard of and new that city planners and urban planners can basically leverage that data. So that's Spin Insight, which we're going to roll out this year at scale. And then we recently announced a really cool other partnership, which is a product that we call Spin Valet, which basically allows scooters. They're 3-wheel scooters that we can remote control. So if a scooter is not correctly parked, we can actually park it neatly with a remote operator, and then potentially in the future also in an autonomous way. But it also allows you to summon a scooter, which is really cool. So you can basically, with your app, say, I need one in front of my door, and then can go around the block and wait for you. So that's some really sci-fi stuff, and basically interesting how quickly this is developing, because it's on a software innovation cycle, right? It's on a rapid innovation cycle where it allows us to innovate at a much faster pace than traditional vehicle industries, I would say. So that's super cool to see, and we're addressing some of the challenges that we see. They get addressed so quickly, whether it was with the swappable batteries and now with this kind of remote controlled operation where we can bring, where we can really make sure that the scooters are neatly parked. I've rarely seen an industry where these things get addressed so quickly by really cool and innovative technology.
How cool is that? I can't wait to see the look on some people's faces as
There's
one of these.
Yeah, you should check out the videos. Just look for Spin Valet, and there was some real cool coverage, and the videos are really cool and really futuristic.
Well, I'll get a copy of that video and I'll put it on the blog post that accompanies this episode on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, just so anyone listening will be able to find that. I'm curious though, as a guy that doesn't drive, I haven't got a driver's license, I don't drive a car, so I can't use the scooters because I don't have that driver's license. Would I still need it for the e-bikes? Do you still need a driver's license for that?
No, not necessarily. Basically, it's part of the specific regulation of these e-scooter trials in the UK.
Okay.
For e-bikes, you don't. This is specifically to the e-scooter trials that you need a driver's license identification.
Cool, got you. And before I let you go, I was going to ask what excites you about the road ahead, but you've already revealed so much. I think you'll struggle to top the Spin Valet. But is there anything else that does excite you about where we're heading?
Well, I think we covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it's for me, it's the future. It's the future of our cities, of our space around you, and how we use that in more creative and more qualitative ways for people. To just make their immediate environment better and give them really cool space to live in. And I think that's what excites me the most. And I think we're going to see that change happening really quickly. And once you've seen how, I always cite this one picture in Lisbon that I like to show, where basically you have the central square. It's a beautiful square right down by the river, by the water, where now you have hundreds of people strolling and nice cafes around it. And then there is a picture from the 80s of the same square where it was a parking lot. Yeah. And back then it was normal. People didn't think about it. When you show this to old people that remember this, old people, I mean, people that remember it from the 80s in Lisbon, they're like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. It was always a parking lot. That seems so crazy today. And I think that's something that is very hard to unsee. And once you start looking at our cities with that perspective, you're like, wow, we could use this space in so much better ways. And I think that's for me the road ahead. That's what I'm most excited about.
That's a beautiful moment to end on. And for anyone listening that would like to check if Spin is in their area, or they've got any plans for Spin coming to their area, or they just want to find out more information, what's the best way of finding you online and equally contacting your team?
Sure. So just the easiest way is to download the app. You just go to the App Store, you look for Spin scooters or Ride Spin, and that will show you the nearest operating area, or if the scooters are available immediately around you. You can also go to the website spin.app that has all this information, or seek us on social media, Ride Spin on Twitter, Ride Spin on Instagram. So we're or just write to us, write to support@spin.pm. So we're available on all channels and not very hard to get hold of. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you, of course.
Well, I love what you've created here. The last time we spoke, you were talking about building the genuine sustainable transportation solution and talking about your e-scooter strategy. But I love how you've started thinking even bigger than that. And we've got the e-bikes and Spin Valet, all incredibly cool. I'd love to try it as soon as it comes right in my area too. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to share your story with me today. Incredibly inspiring. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yes, same here. Thanks for having me.
A big thank you to Felix for coming back on the podcast and talking about Spin's European e-scooter strategy and also key learnings from successful e-scooter trials and the technology behind it all, and how they're using technology to build a genuine sustainable transportation solution and avoid any misuse. And finally, of course, the future of micromobility and technology. But over to you. Have you tried one of these scooters by Spin, wherever you're listening to me in the world, or an equivalent? What do you like? What do you not like? Do you use it instead of public transport, or do you just use it for that last mile? I'd love to hear more about your stories on this, so please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Share with me your adventures in micromobility, and I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So thank you so much for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.